Shazam, The New Beginning, issue 1. Roy Thomas and Dan Thomas writing with Tom Mandrake on the art. This is a 4-part series. This is essentially a mini-series that to re-establish the post-crisis origin of Billy Batson as Captain Marvel. And so it's kind of interesting doing this because obviously we started with Batman from post-crisis, and obviously year 1 wasn't the very first thing that came out, but it was, you know, pretty early on, and we just finished that in this episode. It's interesting to sort of tackle this, which came around a similar time, re-establishing this origin. Yeah. And
it's kind of funny as well because we've had not that long ago the Johns re-establishing the Shazam origin in the you know, the current continuity. I mean, it was part of the New 52 stuff, the Justice League backups at the time. But
what's funny about it is that that's the version that I think we're more familiar with. So it's actually kind of interesting just for us to go back and say, okay, what was this post-crisis? Like, what? Yeah,
there's some beats in it, like Savannah being his uncle.
Yeah, I didn't know that at all. And him wanting to adopt Billy again. So like, I was getting some series of unfortunate events vibes from some of this.
Oh, yeah, I was too, and I was wondering if that was just me, but I could see Neil Patrick Harris playing Savannah. Is that so bad?
Yeah, I could see it. I don't know if this came out before those books were written. They might have been. I don't know.
Oh, they definitely did.
Yeah.
Yeah, those books were like late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah, I thought that, but I wasn't sure. It's one of those things where they could be from the 70s for all I goddamn know.
No, I was reading those as they came out, pretty much.
So we start with the stormy night with the car crash that kills Billy's parents. I actually really liked the art in this first couple of pages. I thought the atmosphere was really strong.
I think I like everything except the panel where the car actually crashes. I think going into the purple background overdoes it a little bit. It takes away a little bit of the weight that every other panel has.
There's something about fire in like 80s and 90s comics I really like. The wreckage in the following page, I really like the way the fire looks.
It's gorgeous, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, I'm into it. I mean, the art is generally pretty good. There's the odd face that doesn't work for me all that much, but
it's very much of its time.
But at the same time, though, I think Savannah's face almost always looks fantastic. Like, he always looks just perfectly sinister.
Fantastically evil.
Yeah, it's great.
It's you look at this and you go, yeah, I can see why you cast Mark Strong.
So so we see Billy with his uncle that he likes, the uncle who's the magician who's poor and has no money. And we get this scene where his uncle has to tell him like what's happened because he gets the phone call, like telling him.
Yeah, the uncle's already looking after him for the evening. The parents are presumably out for the evening. Whatever. Yeah. I don't know. They were going to the theater. Who knows?
Yeah, date night.
Yeah.
And you know, it's this heartbreaking kind of scene, and then we see him in the rain, and that first panel of Savannah when he comes up to talk to him is just the way his head's so shrunken. Like, I mean, that's the one complaint I'd say about casting Mark Strong to play him, is Mark Strong's got such a big, strong jawline, and
he does.
Like in Savannah in comics, he's so squirmy. The best comparison in live action would maybe be the character from Sin City, the yellow bastard, maybe. Was that him?
Yeah, I can see it.
It's the only live action sort of example I can think of that's got a kind of face that I would, associate with this. But so Savannah clearly has future plans in mind for the boy. So we get a whole courtroom scene where they're arguing custody of the child because Savannah married into the family and he's more financially stable. But there's a whole ruse where Savannah has these two people. I mean, I think they're technically like he is their guardian, but they're like they've already left the house. They're they're lying about living with him.
They're living in the dorm, which. Yeah. But the way he talks about it seems like it's still like on campus of the house, like it's like a separate building, not like I'll go back home to your dorm somewhere else. It still feels like they're relatively close. If
we're still going with unfortunate events, this is the little troop pretending to be his kids.
Yeah. If this was not inspired, if this didn't have some inspiration on unfortunate events, I would be surprised.
Yeah. So Billy is thinking that he's ruining his uncle's life because his uncle, they're going to give it to the poor uncle because he has a relationship with Billy. Billy seems to like him. They get on well. But when Billy hears, after a little bit of coercion from those others talking to him, he hears that his uncle will have to give up being a magician, and he's like, I can't ruin his life. I can't do that. So Billy actually says he wants to go with Savannah, and he gets kind of mean about it to sort of convince the good uncle to walk away, and it's kind of heartbreaking actually. You feel bad for him.
It's that classic, throwing the stones at the dog to make it run away for its own safety.
Yeah. But when they get back to the house, he's basically got a storage room. We overhear later that it was just to get the inheritance money for his kooky multiverse schemes, because Savannah's trying to break into other worlds.
He's got some shenanigans on the go.
Yeah, he's got a secret room where he's doing his experiments. And yeah, he treats him like shit. He is. He's Count Olaf, essentially.
He really is.
Billy, gets into fights. He's at a new school. He doesn't like it. It's all these things. But once he hears this from Savannah, he goes on the run. He runs out the house, and he runs through the rain, and he gets to the subway station. So the idea of the subway being a factor in how he gets his powers is still here. It's still an element.
It's one of the most familiar beats in this book.
Yeah. And he's led into the subway by this mysterious figure behind there, and he sees the 7 deadly sins statues up in the... So he's essentially been transported to the Rock of Eternity without realizing that he's moved anywhere. And Shazam shows up and is like, blah, 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 blah. Like, I am Shazam. And...
Say my name.
Yeah, he gets right to it. He's like, say my name. So we get this big full page where he says Shazam, and he's like, wait a minute. What? I feel like I'm blowing up like a balloon. What's going on?
Interestingly, something went wrong, because he talks about it. He's like, I'm still Billy Batson. He's got, his own mind. He's just got the body and powers of Shazam. And the wizard's confused. He's like, no, you should be Captain Marvel. You shouldn't be yourself still in that body. And he remembers the previous timeline.
Oh, Shazam does, yeah. We'll get to that in a second. But I think it's maybe an interesting facet that this is a mistake, and one that I suspect that this 4-issue mini will do something with. Like, maybe why it didn't work on Billy exactly, why he still does remember who he is for some reason.
What's interesting to me is, for us, I think that's the only version of Shazam, Captain Marvel we're familiar with, right? That this is Billy just in an adult body. And this presents the idea, was this not always the case, like pre-crisis?
Well, I don't know if that's the case. I mean, just because it's a mistake that now in this continuity doesn't necessarily mean that it wasn't this way before. It just wasn't a mistake before.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know. That's what I'm saying. This presented this idea that I'm thinking, oh, was that not the case before? And I don't actually know if that's true or not. I don't know what expectation it's playing off. Yeah, but this could equally just, the change could equally just be the idea that it's a mistake, not the fact that he does still, be Billy inside his head. Absolutely, it could be. I have no idea. But no, you're right. The wizard does talk about the fact that he remembers the previous timeline. He talks about pre-crisis, about how there was a Shazam family, or a Marvel family. There was Freddy and there was Mary. And we see this one classic panel, but he's like, no, I can't think about that. To remember this past timeline would lead to madness. So he's like, okay, we just have to do this again. And he kind of, I love when he grumbled a little bit, because when Billy's like talking back to him, he's like, maybe I should have started with a girl this time. Maybe I should have went a different route. I think it's almost a little strange that this was presented as an option in the late 80s. It's a throwaway line here. I'm a little surprised that come the New 52 Shazam reboot, that maybe we didn't start with Mary instead. Yeah, we totally could have. There was no reason why you couldn't have started with Mary and had Billy maybe become, just basically swap roles essentially. Yeah, it's possible. Works perfectly fine. But the wizard explains to Captain Marvel, because that's what he is. He's Captain Marvel. That's what they call him. In this, and it explains that, hey, you're here to defeat Black Adam. The one person I gave my powers to that. It didn't go so well. It didn't go so hot, and he was evil. He became corrupted by the power, and you have to sort of take him on, almost as if the wizard knows that Black Adam's about to be brought back to the world, because that's obviously how we end this issue with Savannah. But yeah, there's this running thing, because what I liked about this is that he says Shazam again. He ends up back outside at the sort of the metal gate of the subway station, and I thought they were going to do a thing where he didn't understand how he could become Captain Marvel again, but I love that he immediately said Shazam by accident, and it immediately happened. Yeah, because he's yelling at the wizard like, "Do you hear me, Shazam?" Because obviously that's his name.
Yeah.
And switches back, and I love that there's this beat that he doesn't realize that he switches at first. There's not like a conscious awareness that he's different. It's just he realizes the surroundings, that he's beaten this door into a pulp, and he's like, shit.
Yeah, and he ends up flying. And he's like, "Oh shit, I can fly!" And it kind of like almost brings in the strength of this, the wisdom of that. It does that stuff sort of gradually as he's like discovering new things and kind of like talks because I feel like there's a trap of almost like, and some good versions have done this where the wizard will just like list these things. He'll just list all the all the things that the word Shazam
I really
means.
like they're on like a stone tablet behind the wizard's head.
Yeah.
Of like wisdom of Solomon, it's speed of Mercury.
Yeah, Mercury's speed.
Yeah, but they're all kind of there, so it's there in the art. You can just read them. It's fine. Don't need exposition from the wizard. Yeah,
and then so he turns back into Billy to leave, but it just sort of it leaves there where he's not really sure what he should do now. He walks off into the storm, all dramatic, and the last page is that Savannah, tinkering with these scientific doohickeys, does finally break some sort of multiverse door, and out comes Black Adam, who says he made it. He's back after 5,000 years, and it's hard not to hear Rita Repulsa in my head when I read that line. Finally, after 10,000 years, I'm free.
Yeah, no, I got that as well. It not its fault, but definitely was thinking about it.
This came first, so it's not.
But I mean, it's the same. We're mentioning unfortunate events. This came before any of these things.
Yes, it did. So,
but it's the same thing we talk about whenever we review like older movies that have, for our standards, predictable twists because we've seen them aped on thousands of times since. Not necessarily that movie's fault. It's the same here.
I thought this issue was pretty solid. We've not really spoken about what we think of it yet all that much, beyond just talking about the moments themselves.
Yeah, I actually I agree. I think it's obviously a little denser than a lot of other comics that we're used to right now.
Yeah, it's a couple
by its nature.
It's a couple pages more. It's 24 pages instead of 22.
Yeah. Not a huge difference, and it doesn't feel extremely long. I think the pacing's pretty good throughout.
Yeah, I think. Do you know, we read so many different versions of Superman, so many different versions of Batman and Wonder Woman, even Flash and Green Lantern. There is something really nice about just getting a dedicated. We're going to focus and it does make you kind of sad that there's not maybe longer ongoings for some of these other characters who do tend to get ignored a lot of the time. Not that there's none, but it was really nice to sort of say, "Hey, I'm reading a Captain Marvel issue 1. This is kind of cool. I'm happy to be reading a story, even if it's just another origin story about a character who doesn't get as much love typically."
I think I appreciated how different the origin story was to what I expected, even though there were all the familiar beats, right? With we've got the wizard, we got Say the Name, we got the 7 Deadly Sins, we got Black Adam. All those things are in there, the subway, but all the context around Billy feels, for us, I think, fresh, even though this is how it was for years, decades. But given where we've come into comics and our experience with Shazam and Captain Marvel here, this feels like a kind of fresh to us.
Yeah. And it's interesting as well that it does include both Savannah and Black Adam. Much like Johnsy's origin.
I think there's a lot of temptation to just lean into one or the other with modern origins now. That goes for any hero origin. It's really tempting just to lean into one thing and focus. Whereas this, it comfortably juggles those two so far, at least. But we'll see how it goes. But this doesn't have me worried at all.
No, not at all. It's interesting as well that much like Year One, the Batman Year One, that is, it's another 4-issue story. So I expect this was probably a testing ground as well. Like, can we have an ongoing? Does it sell well enough? Unlike Batman, where obviously Batman sells well enough for the ongoing.
Yeah. So they could just throw it in the middle of its main book. Whereas with this, you want to test that.
Yeah. So, I'm intrigued. But no, I had fun with it. I think I enjoyed the the kid in the horrible situation with the horrible new step parent kind of situation. You know, that whole vibe was working for me, and not just because I was imagining Savannah going, "Run away, run away."
Oh, I would love to watch a take on this origin, just done in that style.
But yeah, the actual wizard stuff was fun, and I enjoyed the art for the most part. Like I say, the odd face, especially on young Billy, I thought was maybe the worst of it. But Savannah looked creepy. I think Black Adam looks pretty good. All that stuff, and Captain Marvel as well. You know, when Captain Marvel becomes Captain Marvel.
Yeah, I think there's only one panel that I feel the face looks a bit funny on Captain Marvel, and it's right at the end, not the very last page, but the one before. And it's where he's got the big vertical panel on the right, where he's kind of in shadow. It looks a bit off there, as opposed to where he looks in every other panel.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. All right, well, I'm looking forward to reading more of this. Much better than Emperor Joker already, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah.
What are you giving it?
I'm going to give it a solid 7. It's tempting to give it the 7.5, but I'm just going to shy away from that, I think.
Yeah. It's almost a bit of a running gag now that I just rate things higher than you, but I feel...
You say that. Last episode, you rated pretty much everything the same as me.
That's true. Oh, that's true, actually. Yeah, I'll go a little bit higher. I think I'll give it the 8. I had a good time reading this. I really had fun discovering... I love going back to eras like this and kind of like digging into like, you know, comics that I haven't read yet and discovering stuff. It's the sort of thing that I like doing with movies as well, and I started doing that with movies a lot earlier on than I did with comic books. So there's still a lot of this still to discover for me with comics, and I think yeah, I like it. So
I think there's less of a desire or a need to do this with comics, because I mean there's a more modern Shazam origin that we can just go with, right? And we can just read that. It's fine. We don't need to read this.
Yep.
Whereas with a lot of movies, they didn't necessarily remake, you know, sometimes they did just remake them, but they didn't always just remake them. Sometimes if you want to experience that story, you have to just go and watch that movie.
Yeah, there's a lot less desire to it, but I desire to do it, which is why I made a show called Previously in the Multiverse.
I'm here. I'm not saying I don't have the desire to read these. I just meant desire was maybe not the right choice, but more necessity. There's a lack of necessity to read these because we've got an origin that works perfectly fine.
Exactly. So I made one. I made a necessity.
You made an excuse. Yeah, you did.
Yes.